This is a portable cassette player from 1980-81, I think. It's got separate left and right volume buttons. It's a top loader cassette, just like you used to get on sort of an old car stereo. It's got a pause button that you have to hold in to pause it. And it's got a button on the side that ejects or fast forwards. When you put the tape in, it starts playing automatically. But if you want to fast forward it, you can use that massive button on the side. Battery compartment in the back takes 4 AA batteries, and it came with some headphones and some speakers. Now, I picked this up from Facebook Marketplace, and I couldn't believe it because I haven't seen one of these for around 42, 43 years, because I used to have one. It was my first portable cassette player. Thought about it since. I've had a look around. I've checked eBay, checked the internet. I could never remember the name of it, but there were certain features of it that I can remember. That battery compartment where you got the instructions that says push it in and push it to across the side. That massive button on the side for fast forwarding and ejecting. Those left and right separate volume buttons. And the fact that when I bought it as well, I remember it coming with speakers. So I remember those distinct features, but I can't remember what it was called, can't remember the name of it, and I've never seen one since. So I was really surprised when this thing popped up on Facebook Marketplace. It was a bit of a distance, it was about an hour's travel, but it was a lovely summer's morning, and it was a great excuse to get on the motorbike. I had no idea if this thing was working. But for me, it didn't matter. I just had to have it. Even if it didn't work, it didn't matter to me because I wanted it just for the aesthetics. You know, the fact that I'd finally been able to find my first. I keep wanting to call it a Walkman, but I mean, when did Walkmans first come out? Surely this preceded Walkmans. My first portable cassette player. So. This video is about me trying to repair it. When you apply power to it, you get a power light. You can hear the motor spinning, but it doesn't play. Another thing that I remember about it that I'm struggling with as well is the fact that it used to have a plastic shoulder strap. And that's basically how you used to wear it. You put this thing on your shoulder, put your headphones in, and you'd walk around with this thing slung over your shoulder. But yeah, I just can't find any information on this thing at all. I know the name of it. I've Googled it, can't find anything on it. I've took a picture of it and done a Google search, can't find anything on it at all. So there's 4 screws to get into it. So I've taken those out, that's easy. But now I'm stuck. I can't work out how to get into this thing. It seems stuck on the corner where the pause button is. Everywhere else is quite loose. Seems to be quite freely moving. Nothing seems to be stuck except on that corner. Obviously, the fact that I haven't seen one of these since ever, I don't want to force anything. I'm just going really, really careful and just trying to work out why it's stuck. Is it the pause button? Is there a hidden clip? There's no hidden clips anywhere else. And this went on for ages, so I'll skip the video and find the bit where I actually work it out. But it was a combination of 2 things. So the headphone socket needs to be pushed in as much as you dare because it's on a fixed board inside. But if you push the headphone socket in, and then that allows you to lift it over the shoulder strap clip. So I'm just going to find that bit of the video and fast forward to it. So I'm just using a large Phillips screwdriver to force the headphone socket in. And then once I've done that, it finally comes apart. Just being a bit cautious that things don't sort of spring out in all directions here. I didn't know if there was any significant wires between the two halves, but in the end it's just the cables that go to the battery terminals. Fairly compact inside. You've got the main sort of cassette mechanical part. You've got a motor attached to that, and then you've got a electronics board with a load of capacitors, and that's about it. So I'm just taking some pictures for reference, because I didn't know, as I said, I can't find any details online. I've got no reference videos or pictures that I can find anywhere, so I need to make my own notes as I go along. So I'm just desoldering the battery terminals. Sometimes I don't bother doing this, but for the amount of time that it takes, you might as well, because it just makes it a lot easier to work on if you haven't got this half of a cassette recorder attached to it with two wires. And also it takes a power input from an adapter, so I didn't think, there didn't seem to be anything clever going on here, so I didn't think I needed that to be connected for it to work. I thought I'd remove the electronics board, free up a bit of space, see if I could get a better view of the mechanical area. So at this point I'm working on the principle that I can hear the motor spinning. So hopefully, like most things, most cassette players that are of a certain age, it's going to be the band. The band's probably just too loose, and things aren't spinning. So at this point I'm trying to work out how to get the cassette mechanism freed from the plastic housing. That's the band that I can see running from the motor. It's intact. It's a little bit loose, but it is actually intact. So I couldn't see any screws from the top, but there was this one here on the motor that looks like it's coming from underneath. But when you turn this thing over, you can't see any screws. So I'm assuming at this point that I've got a hidden screw. So there's two additional screws at the bottom, which I'm taking off now, and I'm hoping that's going to reveal a hidden screw, and it's going to give me access to this cassette mechanism. So the whole sort of corrugated plastic section just comes off, and then it reveals that hidden screw underneath. Look at it from the front, I had no idea that was sort of a fake panel. It was only until I got in it and found those additional screws that I realised that it came off. So I thought, cracked it. Just need to drop that screw, and that'll be it. I'll have access to the band. So I can just lift this off now, right? Right? No. I mean, that screw definitely helped. It gave me a bit of movement, but this thing was still locked in place. And there was just no screws on the top. There's one screw, but it looked like almost an adjustment screw. It didn't look like a sort of a physical screw that was holding this thing in. So I was feeling here on the label, I couldn't feel any sort of indentations to suggest there were some hidden screws on the label, and I just could not work out how to get this thing off. So I had a decision to make. Do I persevere and potentially try and keep trying to get into it and potentially damage it, or do I try and just work with the band in place? I had a look and I thought that potentially I might be able to get this band off and then back on again, or a replacement band back on without actually taking it apart. So that's the path that I went down here, is that I'm going to try and remove this band from the motor without taking it apart anymore. And you can't really see it, but using some tweezers I was able to hook that band off. It was a flat band. It was attached to the motor in a groove, and then it was attached like a big flat flywheel, almost like you would get under a record deck. And there it is, there's the band. So I thought, I've got a box of spare bands, I'll dig those out and try and find something suitable that's hopefully a little bit tighter, and I'll fix this issue. Unfortunately, I didn't have an exact match on the band. Most of the bands I had at the right size are more square shaped than flat. So I ordered some additional flat bands, but while I was waiting I thought I'd give it a go. This was the right size and I didn't see why it shouldn't work. So a little bit difficult again because I haven't got the access that I need, but I put the band on and then I put a cassette in, give it some power, and I give it a test. So previously when I tried it, the band wasn't turning, but the motor was. So the band was slipping basically. This time when I tried it with the new band on, I couldn't hear the motor turning at all. The motor was just stopped, and I'm just touching it here with some tweezers, because again before, if I touched it, you could hear the motor sort of rub against the tweezers, but now it's just locked solid with the new band on. So not helped it at all. So I'm thinking, is the band too tight? But I knew that I'd sized it fairly accurately with the old one. Does it just not like the shape? You know, the fact that it's square instead of flat. So spent a while looking at it, and then I decided, okay, it's got to be the band. That's the only thing I've changed. I've gone from a motor that was spinning to one that's not spinning. I don't have a spare band, so I could stop now and wait for the new bands to arrive. Or I thought I would try and shrink the original band. I've read about the fact if you boil the bands, that they can work for a year, they can work for a week, but I thought, well, it would give me an indication as to, if it shrinks a little bit, as to if this thing's going to work. So that's where I went next, is I got the original band. I didn't put it in a pan because I was concerned that by putting it into a pan, the band could have been sat directly on the heat and that could have caused problems. So I just put it into a cup of hot water basically, just kept on topping the water up, and I left it in there for 3 minutes, and then I tried it again with the original band. And this put me back to the start. The band wouldn't turn, but the motor was now spinning again. At this point, I'm looking at that sprocket that feeds the cassette, and I can feel that it's got some resistance to it. And then I'm sort of thinking, well, hang on a minute, that's not actually attached to the belt that I'm working on, so how's that going to turn? How does that drive the cassette? There's nothing else in here that's pulling that cassette on, so I'm missing something. And what it was is there's actually meant to be two belts. You got the main motor belt that is in perfect condition, no issues at all, and obviously I can see that one. And then there's another further belt that is attached to the top of the flywheel and then goes round that sprocket. I just couldn't see that belt. Parts of it had turned into mush, and what was remaining was round, so tightly round that sprocket that it just wasn't visible. But that belt being so tight was the reason why it wasn't turning. So I now have to clean it, and I need to get another belt around that. Now, this is where I knew realistically I'm going to have access problems, because one part of my brain was saying, you're not going to get this belt on with the access that you've got, and I've got the other side of my brain saying, yeah, it'll be alright if you just keep trying it and spend ages doing it. There'll be a way to get this belt on without having to open this thing up. So stubbornly I spent probably the next hour trying to fit a replacement belt, and ultimately failing because I just didn't have the access. You can see I'm just pulling out bits of belt here. So I'll skip through a lot of pain of trying to fit this belt, and then I'll go on to what I actually did next. I've got loads out, and it's actually painful to watch this back, just how long I spent trying to thread this belt, knowing that ultimately I just couldn't see a way that I was able to get this belt on the route that I needed it to. I'd get it so far, and then there'd just be something in the way that would stop it threading around the bit that I needed. And all the time just keep coming back to the conclusion that there had to be some hidden screws under this sticker. I considered desoldering the PCB entirely to give myself better access, but in the end I was able to move it out of the way enough. But even that didn't help. So I've got a dilemma. What do? Do I just leave it? Do I stop now and just keep it for aesthetics value, or do I plough on ahead and try and get this thing working? I decided to go for it. So I broke out the hot air gun, set it to 100 degrees C, and the idea was to heat this sticker up and try and peel it with as little damage as I could, and hopefully stick it back down. Now, as soon as I got under a corner, I realised that it wasn't a sticker. It was actually a very thin metal plate. If anyone's ever taken apart a Spectrum 48K, you know, the sort of the metal around the zombie flesh keys. You know, it's that sort of style of metal, really thin piece of metal. But once I realised that, I thought there's a really good chance I'm going to get this off without causing too much damage, and there's a good chance that I'm then going to get it back on as well. So just going around very slowly, applying heat gently, making sure that I'm not doing damage to the plastic, and just carefully just working my way around it. And eventually, as the glue gets hot, the thing starts to give. and I start to make some progress. I was pleased how that came off. Came off with very little damage, and underneath there's the 2 screws. I couldn't feel them because it was a metal plate and not plastic, but ultimately, thankfully, the right decision to take that plate off. So the 2 additional screws loosened up, that frees up the mechanism. And if I can flip it over and get to the other side, I've got access to where I need to be. There's the big flywheel. That's what the big band attaches to. And the white wheel is where the other band goes around. And you can't see it at the moment, but where I'm scraping is I'm just looking at all the black sort of tar that's being left by the other band. So the first thing is to get it cleaned up. There you can just see it. So you can see the white wheel, and then to the right of that, where my finger is now, that's just all black tar. So I'm going to clean that up first. Just using a cotton bud soaked in IPA, and just going over it, cleaning it up. It's just turned into like an oily residue. So I spend a few minutes going through quite a few cotton buds and just getting rid of all that rubbish, to make sure the mechanism and the rollers are all free from movement. And once I did that, once I cleaned it, I was able to spin that sort of sprocket, and it was a lot freer. So things were looking good. So the next step then was to try and get try and find a suitable additional belt, which I'd found. And try and get that in place. I couldn't see any way of doing it without taking it apart. There may be an easier way than what I did it, but I ended up removing a couple of screws on the arm that holds the big flywheel in, and I put the belt on that way. I left the camera zoomed in too much to see a lot of the belt replacement, but these are the 3 screws that I undid. Took that off. That allowed me to take that arm off, and then I could slip the belt over the big flywheel and then around the other white roller. The belt that's going around the flywheel, that's the original motor belt. I haven't changed it. As I said, I didn't have one that was suitable. I boiled it. But ultimately, I thought that now I'd freed up all that gunk from around that sprocket, that might be all that band needed. It hadn't disintegrated like the other belt had done, so that might be all that was needed. So now I'm going to put it back together and give it a test. So just getting everything in place. I'm going to leave the PCB loose as long as it's not going to short out on anything, which it didn't seem to be. I'm just going to give it a test and see if that works any better. just securing the mechanism in place. The fact that, when you put a cassette in there, there's quite a little force in it. When you're pressing eject again, there's quite a bit of force and movement. So I didn't want this thing going anywhere. I didn't want it to create a short with the PCB. So just securing it down with a couple of the screws. Just checking that those two wires aren't touching each other. Just checking I've got no shorts, and just trying to make a decision if there's any reason not to try this now. That's just like a little bit of material, I guess, that stops stuff getting into the mechanism. It was a little bit bent, out of shape, but it was okay. So I'm using power from the power supply. This is the original power supply that came with it. It's a 2-prong adapter, just like mine was. So as soon as you plug it in, you get a red LED light that comes on. These things don't really seem to be made for maintenance. The LED light, for example, it's been pushed into the socket, and then like a soldering iron's been pushed into the plastic around it to hold it in place. So you saw that the tape actually turned, so that's an improvement, but I quickly ejected it because something was catching. It was good to see the tape actually turn, but something was catching. So I was trying to work out what was catching here. Have I messed up on the belt? Have I got a wire that's caught up? But something is definitely catching. So I plugged the headphones in, the speakers in this time, and I've got some sound, but the sound sounds like it's dragging. It's a little bit slow as well, and I've still obviously got that catching sound. So I need to really work out what that is, what's causing that. Now the only thing that, obviously it could have always been there. I don't know. I don't know what the life of this thing is. But the biggest thing that I've done, the biggest change that I've done, is I've took that arm off. Now there's 3 screws, and the screws did have some green on them. I don't know if they were markers for alignment or like a Loctite, but I thought I'd go back and have a look at that arm, because maybe that arm is holding the sprocket in a certain position. Because with no taping, it spins fine. There's no noise. It behaves as you would expect it to behave. It's only when you put the tape in. So is the tape pushing too hard against the tape head, for example? Is that what's causing the noise I can hear? When I adjusted those screws, have I knocked it out of alignment? Can I readjust the screws and pull the tape, or pull the sprocket away from the tape head, and then when I put the tape in, there's not as much pressure. So that's what I'm going to go and look at next. Again, I've cut loads out here because it took me ages to get to this point of faffing and frustration. But what I'm doing is the 3 screws that I released, that I undid. I'm just releasing them, sacking them off. I'm moving that sprocket away from the tape head, and then I'm tightening the screws up again. While it's all pushed further away from the tape bed. So the theory is when I put the cassette in, hopefully the cassette is just going to be a little bit further off of the tape head, because that's what I think was causing that dragging sound. So just apply, as I tighten it up, I'm applying pressure just to try and keep it a little bit further away from the tape head. Making sure I don't over tighten things as well. That was a little bit too loose, but I've just tightened up a little bit more, just in case that was also causing any dragging. Everything looks good. I think I'm going to reassemble it and give it another try. Again, just making sure the PCB is not shorted on anything. This time I haven't secured it down. Just want to get it powered up and just see if I can get it to start without making that noise. And this time it doesn't. It spins and it's quiet. So I might have solved it. Just tightening it up, hold it in place. Now I've got it where I need it to be. I'm trying to lock it down so it doesn't move, and hopefully it will stay working. Plugging the power in again. Mechanism seems to work. No dragging. If I can find where to put the power. There we go. Get some sound. I have no idea what was on that tape. It was some northern comedian. Got it. We have got it. Just need to mute Belinda in case I get a copyright strike. But yeah, it's working. Amazing. I can't believe how long I've spent on this, and ultimately what was a band replacement. The problem was all about access. The hidden screws didn't make life easier. The headphone socket that needed to be pushed in. And then just my reluctance, hesitation, just I didn't want to break this thing. I said I'd never seen one for 42 years. I did not want to damage this. So just probably being a bit over careful. But I think at this point I realised that it's actually going to work, I'm going to have something that I can use, and I can start to put it back together. Just spraying some contact cleaner on the volume pots and working them. They're a little bit crackly, I noticed earlier. Probably not been used for a long time and sat in the same position. So loads of contact cleaner and just working backwards and forwards to clean up all that oxidization. More wiggling, lots of wiggling. Just reattach those. Not much point of having a portable cassette player if it's not got portable power. Those bits of metal, I thought they looked a bit dirty, so I thought I'd just test them. And what I found is that I had connectivity up to a point, and then as I got towards the end of the finger, the bit that actually touches the battery compartment, I just lose connectivity or conductivity. So they weren't going to work. So they needed cleaning. Best way I found to do this was to scrape away using a file, get it back down to the bare metal, clean it with some IPA, and then I went over it with some fresh solder just to freshen it up. Thing with the battery compartment, put some batteries in, and it now works on batteries. Put that cover back there. Find the screws, screw that down. And start to reassemble it. Just did it in reverse. Got the headphone socket aligned first. A few issues getting the cassette flap aligned. It was easier just to push it in a bit and then close it. And then just aligning those pillars, closing it all up all the way around, and then putting the well, actually I didn't. I left the screws out at this stage, so I just wanted to give it a test with the screws out just in case there was a problem. I also thought I would leave the cover off as well, just in case I had problems with the band that I didn't replace. I needed to go back in and replace it. But in the end, what I've done is I've actually used some really thin double-sided tape to stick it down. So that's how it is at the moment. It's just stuck down with some double-sided tape. That's it. It's reassembled pretty much, and this is just my final test. Yeah, that's probably why I decided to end up using sticky tape, because it was just going to annoy me as I used it over the next few days. This comes with I've still got actually the original retro orange Guardians of the Galaxy style headphones, the original ones, but they're really dirty and manky, just after years. So I've ordered some new orange foam inserts for the headset, and I've also ordered a sort of a replica 80s headset as well. Because when I was using the headset, I did notice that if you wiggled the wire where the headphone jack goes into the cassette, you lose one of the channels, which is not that uncommon for headphones. So I thought I'd treat it to a new set of headphones. I'll still have the original, keep the original ones, but if I am going to use it ever, a nice set of new retro style headphones would set it off really well. So that's it. That's the repair complete. I hope you found it interesting. So ultimately, it wasn't a particularly exciting fix, but for me, I now have my working original portable cassette that I had when I was about 7 or 8 years old. That apparently I used to take everywhere. And I just thought it was the best thing ever at the time. That I was able to take this thing around and listen to music. I never thought I would see one again. So amazing to have found one, amazing that it's in such good condition, and I'm very, very pleased that I've been able to get it working again.